All right, so our last verse from last week was about the price laid on someone who's ox gored somebody to death. This verse coming up today clarifies that a lawsuit instead of death can take place for men and women both. All right, so we begin today with Shemot, which is also known as Exodus 21:31. Literally in English, it would say, if son he gore or daughter he gore, as judgment the this he do to he. You could probably figure that one out. But it starts with the Hebrew word o. Oh my. No. just an O. It means or. That's how they say or. This, that. Get it? Yeah, I knew you would. We've had that word before. Then the next word is ben or van, more properly in this sentence. It is applied to a subject rendering obedience to a king or lord as to a father. Hence, metaphorically, a son of death is one doomed to die, and as if delivered into the dominion of death, a son of stripes. That guy, son of stripes is doomed to stripes. Somebody who's always getting into trouble and always being punished. They call him a son of stripes. It's said of a son is a disciple, inasmuch as teachers were treated with reverence and obedience as if they were their own parent. And the teacher would then receive the title of father. That's where the Catholics got that. They stole that from the Jews. Sons of the prophets were the disciples of the prophets. Now, the schools of the prophets were actually schools where people learned to be prophets, right? No. It was an idiomatic phrase used of the disciples who followed the prophets. Those men who followed them around were called the school of the prophets. Anyway, so a son, though it is thought of more commonly as a child, as the masculine or male child born to somebody, it's a son. And in this case, we're talking about a son of Israel, a son of God, if you will. Yeah, Israel, you do realize, was called the Son of God, right? And why Yeshua, when he called himself the Son of God, nobody thought anything of it because all he was saying idiomatically was he was Israeli. He was a Jew. That's all that meant. It didn't mean that God fathered, that God fathered a child through someone else's wife, right? Like the Christianity has turned that into. No, that's not what it meant. It meant that he was Jewish. All right, then our next word is yigach. We've had that. That's this big animal, whether it's an ox or a bull, makes no difference. It's the same word. But if he gores, that's one that has horns, and he has a tendency to shove them around with his horn, with his head. Some say it's of him, trampling on people and stuff like that. All kind of falls into the. So it's an animal who's, it hurts people basically to gore someone. Then it says, oh, remember that means or vat. So it's a son or a daughter. Important in Hebrew because the women were not counted. If you said there were 3,000 souls, they had only counted the men. So if all the men are married, that's 6,000 souls. If all of them have 2 kids, do the math, right? But they would say there's 3,000 souls because women and children were not included. So here it's saying the sons and the daughters, the sons and the daughters. Does it make any difference? So everybody's going to be included in this. All right. Uh, then it's yigach. So if he gores the son or if he gores the daughter, ka mishpat. Now this is a new word for us. It's literally means as judgment. So it's a judgment according to the Torah. What else did they judge according to, right? In America, we set up this thing called the Constitution, and that's most people I've found recently don't know that the law of the land in America is the Constitution. You ask what it is, and they don't actually know that that's the answer. And we stray very far from that because in the last 100 years, the movement called the progressive movement has gotten into our politics, and they're trying very literally to get rid of the Constitution. Why? Because then they can make the laws say whatever they want them to say. Then they can sell freedom for whatever price they can get. If you're a rich man, you commit murder, you can afford it, then they can let you off because the Constitution has no meaning except what they want it to have, right? So this is judgment according to the Torah in the case of the Bible, because that was their law. It was the law of their land. It was the law of their people. So it's used in the act of judgment, of judging. It's of the place of judgment. I think you get the idea here. And this is hazeh, which they say the this. It's more common in Hebrew to say hazeh or the this than it is just to say zeh. But they did say zeh, which means this, This, pointing at something in particular, zeh, this. So, but more commonly they said hazeh. And that's common in quite a few languages. It's actually more uncommon just to say this like we do in English. Most of the languages still to this day say the this, literally. But then it says, yeah, asem. So we already had this as asa. It's properly to labor, to work about, to do, to manufacture. And they use it just simply for the word do. So if he did this, or you will do that, right? It's that same thing that we think of in our language. It really means exactly the same thing. Since it says lo, which is a sound-alike word. Lo usually means not. It's the negative article. But in this case, it's the lamed and the bob put together, which is not how you spell the lo in the negative article. That would be lamed aleph. This is lamed vav. So it's to he or to him. So your translation is, if he gore a son or daughter, according to this judgment, it will be done to him. So remember, the previous verse told us what was going to be done. If he knew that this animal had a tendency to do this, he's going to be facing death unless the family is willing to settle for a financial fee. Like a civil court type thing when you're suing for damages. And why would you do that? It just killed your son or your daughter. Well, this could be your brother whose animal killed your son or daughter, and maybe you don't want to put your brother to death. Maybe you don't want to have to face down everybody in the family for the rest of your life for what you did to your brother, right? So then there's a lawsuit rather than the penalty of death. Uh, we have remnants of this in our own world. Think about when O.J. Simpson, who I guess got his parole, he finally won it yesterday. Uh, Most of the people in America actually believe that he did, in fact, commit that crime. And he didn't get punished for that. They found him not guilty for that crime. But then the family came in and sued him pretty much for every penny he had. And, one thing led to another, and he went back to jail. He actually went to jail for something else other than murder. Well, it's the same type of thing. We had the criminal case, which he won, and then we had the civil case, which he lost. So it's that sort of thing. And it comes from these very verses. Okay, so another portion of the judgment is going to be found in the very next verse. It's Shemot 21:32. Literally in English, if male servant he gore, the ox or maid servant, silver 30 shekalim he give to Lord his, and the ox he stone. So, of course, this is specific to servants, people who are indentured servants or actually own because, they decided they wanted to stay with their master from now on instead of just for the 7 years, or they were captured in war and they remain servants anyway. So they do this. Remember, from last week it was that if he knew the animal was prone to gore people, and he didn't put the animal to where it, place it in a pen or something where it couldn't gore people, then he was facing death. At the very least, he was facing a lawsuit. So that's part of it. Now we're saying if it's a son or a daughter. So you have to realize this is Hebrew, and this is going to be idiomatic. They're not just talking about, well, if it happened to be the son or the daughter of somebody. Well, everyone's going to be the son or the daughter of somebody. Think about that. What they're saying is, if this is a son or a daughter of Israel, then the option to do a financial thing is laid out on the table. So now he's going to make even more clearly, this is the actual fee that will be charged if it's a servant. So it starts off with if eved, if it's a male servant, someone who's an indentured servitude, someone who's a servant to a king, his ministers, his courtiers, they were all servants, right? Figuratively applied in many senses. One would be a worshiper of God, and that's the way just the son or the daughter. So that's the worshiper of God, right? The Jew. So if it's a worshiper of God, the minister or ambassador of God, so that's a prophet or a teacher. Something else you might want to know is that, if you watch the movies where it's England or thereabouts in the Dark Ages, everybody's always, "Me Lord, me Lord, me Lord," right? Well, that came from Hebrew society because the Hebrews, in lowly adulation, called themselves servants. "I am your servant, my Lord," right? They're the ones that actually started that. Anyway, so the next word is yigach. We've already had this. So if he gores, hashur, that's if the ox gores. Oh, remember, or Ama, so it was if he gores a male servant, or if he gores Ama, a maiden, a girl servant, a female as opposed to a male, the female servant. Then it says kesef. That's actually the Hebrew word for silver, but it's so called from its pale color, because kesef identifies the actual color of silver. It's weighed out in small, unstamped pieces back in the day, having been anciently used for money. So they don't, in this case, it didn't say he will pay, it's he will weigh out, if you will, silver. And how much will it be? Sheloshim, 30. That's the word 30. Then 30 what? Shekalim. So now it's going to be specific. He's going to weigh out 30 pieces of silver. And what's the weight? The weight of a shekel. And since it's 30 of them, it's plural, so it's shekalim, right? A shekel, a certain weight of gold and silver containing 20 beans, which the Hebrews used when weighed for money. Of this, there are two kinds distinguished, the holy shekel and the royal shekel. But which was the larger and which the less of these is not stated. We don't even know. In the time of the Maccabees, the Maccabees, just kidding here. In 1 Maccabee 15:6, silver coins were struck of the weight of a shekel, bearing the inscription Shekel Yisrael. That's what it said, shekel from Israel. The coins contained 4 attic drachma, in other words, 1 stater. According to Josephus, in what's ARCH stand for? Archaeology? It's one of Josephus's books. It's Archaeology 3:8, and it says, anyway, that's where it says the contained 4 attic drachmas. Drachms, however you say that. In other words, what we're saying is nobody knows. Is they're trying to make it the weight of certain grains of corn and blah, 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 blah. Nobody has any idea what it is. I'm going to move on because that's very confusing. This is E10, so that's he will give, right? It's to place in the hand. It's not like that guy who showed me that little box of money and said he was going to give me a boatload of money and then I never saw him again. Now, this would have been as if that guy placed that box of money in my hand. So he's going to give these shekels, whatever that amount comes to. And it says La Donai, so it's the Lord, the owner, if you will, of that ox. He was called the Lord of the ox. Then it says Behashur, and the ox. And the ox, Yisakel. The ox will be stoned. And that's what you think of stoning is. They're going to kill the ox. So Shemot 21:32, if he gore a male servant or maid servant, he will give 30 shekalim of silver to their Lord, and his ox will be stoned. So remember, these are servants, so the money goes to the Lord of the servants, and the ox will be stoned. Nobody gets anything from that. Kasuto said, also the case of the pit as a typical exemplar of damage is commonly found in the legal tradition of the ancient East. The Hittite laws, 146 and 147, the Neo-Babylonian laws also, but so far no statute has been found concerning the case of an ox or a donkey that fell into a pit, except in the Bible. Where it says the 30 shekalim, Rashi pointed out that without giving a reason, this verse assigns a price to a servant. The Sephorno compares this price to the price of a woman, which is found in Leviticus 27:4, 30 shekalim. Where it says his ox will be stoned, even Ezra said that the ox must be killed because it killed a man who was created in the image of God. As cute as that is, there's nothing to base it on. It's just an idea that he came up with and he's throwing it out there. Okay, so it's not inspired in scripture. It's just a thought he had. The Shemot 21:33 literally says, and if he open man pit, or if he dig man pit and not he cover it, and fall there ox or donkey. So it's not a complete sentence, right? Because these sentences were broken up oddly at times. So this is only half of your sentence. Started off with Vehi, which is and if, Yiftach. Here we have a new word. He opened. It's to open as the eyes. You open the eyes, right? Yiftach Enayim. Open your eyes. Open the eyes. A door. To open a book. To open the mouth. Whether it be to eat or to sing, to speak, especially after silence. Hence to utter words, and on the other hand, not to open the mouth at all, to be silent. To open anyone's mouth, said of God, in other words, to cause one to speak who had been dumb. So you open the mouth, and then who's to someone who can't speak? The dumb talks, or the dumb speaks. Anyway, to open anyone's ears is to reveal to him. So if you tell somebody something, you've opened their ears. To open anyone's hand to anyone is to be liberal toward him. Anyway, you get the idea. It's to open something. This is ish, that's a man, the opposite of a woman. In the Bible world, they only had two genders. There weren't 467,000 and counting. Then the word o, which means or, ki, which means if or because. Then it says yikre, he dig. So if he opens a pit or he digs, it's to dig in the earth, to dig a well, to dig a hole, right? Or if he digs, ish, the man, if the man digs, bor, a pit, a cistern. It's a prison sometimes because dried up cisterns and wells were used as prisons. People would drop down in them and a big old stone was thrown over the top. You got to stay there in the complete darkness until your fine was paid or you did your time. This is velo and not yechasen. So if he's dug this pit and he does not cover it, he doesn't put something over it, then a fall, that even sounds like the word fall. It's to fall into a hole. So if you didn't do something to make that pit safe, and somebody happens to fall into that pit, this kind of sounds like OSHA, right? God's the original OSHA. Shama. So if he falls into the pit right there, sure, an ox. Or hamor, and a donkey. So if an ox or a donkey happens to fall into the pit. So here's your half sentence. And if, I should say a man, and if a man uncovers a hole, pit is an idiom for if he uncovers a hole. Or if a man digs a hole and does not cover it, and an ox or donkey fall into it, so there's your, now you got a cliffhanger. Opens a pit. Rashi said that to open a pit was to uncover an existing one. Uncovers a hole. It's an idiom, right? So he's right. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Rashbam said this was a pit that a man dug and left uncovered. They're both right. Anyway, dig a hole. Rashi said this part was about digging an existing hole deeper because he's already made a statement. He's backed himself into a corner. And so rather than say maybe my original statement was wrong, he's like, yeah, this is to dig an existing hole deeper. No, that's not what it said. Ox or donkey. Rashi said that these animals were given to exclude humans. Maybe. All right. Let's move on to the next verse. 21:34. Literally, it says, Lord the pit, he pieced silver, he returned to Lord his, and the dead he be to he. Okay. Baal. Remember that word? It's just a generic word for Lord or master or owner. Baal. So the Lord Havor, the Lord of the pit. We just had that vor, the word vor, pit, the cistern, the Lord of the guy who owns the hole, because presumably you're digging it on your property. Yes, shalom, he peace. He will restore. Shalem is, they say literally he makes peace, right? But it's to make restitution, to pay a price. Then it says kesef. Remember that word? Silver. He's going to pay silver, yashiv. That's to return, to turn about, to return, metaphorically to be converted. It's of a non-Torah observant person called a sinner, converting to living according to the Torah. When it's followed by another verb, it's to return and do, or to return to do something, anything. It's the same as to repeat it, to do it again. Figuratively, it's used to turn oneself to any person or thing, and for example, to turn yourself to Yahweh. And then B, it's when it's followed by the word mean, it's to cease from something, to leave off from anything. So it would be to turn away from Yahweh, if you will. Our next word is libe alai, to Lord his, or to his Lord, to his owner, to his master, however you want to look at it. Vahamet, and the dead, met, mut, mot, mot. That word is to die. It's you killed something, so now it's dead. It's not breathing. The spark of his life. How's that go? The spark of his life is drained, and only his stench remains. That's from a movie. Anyway, then the next word is ye yet. which is to be, to exist. It will be. It will come to pass. That's the way it's usually translated. Pretty much okay. Then it says, lo, to he or to it. So what's it say? It says, the Lord of the pit will make peace in silver with their Lord, the Lord over the animal, and the dead animal, the dead animals, it doesn't matter if it's a singular or plural, will be his. So if he's done this, the price is, you're going to pay the price of whatever that animal would normally cost, and the guy gets to keep your animal too. So you're getting a double whammy. You've lost your animal, and you got to pay the price for that animal on top of it. So probably should be responsible when you dig a hole. Just saying. Now, the words will make peace and silver. Even Ezra said that the market value of the carcass was to be deducted from the silver, but the text doesn't support that. It doesn't say that at all. He just didn't want to pay full price, is what I'm thinking. Rashi said that silver or money can be anything of monetary value, such as bran. Actually, he's right. Just because it says silver doesn't mean it has to be paid in silver. It can be paid in gold. It can be paid in dollar bills. It can be paid in hot dogs. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever that you have of value, if that guy's willing to take it, you know, if it's real expensive and all you have is an old tractor and he could use an old tractor, that's all fine and good. So he is correct about that. Now moving on to 35, literally in English it says, and if he strike ox, man, ox, intimate friend he, and dead, and sell he, the ox, the life, and divided they, silver he, and also the dead he divide. Okay, that one's Disney, right? So it starts off vechi, and if ye go, if ye strike, it's just to smite, to punch, to slap, especially used of God striking men with a plague. Well, if you're Puritan anyway, that's the way they saw it. God is said to smite a people before their enemies. In other words, to permit them to be smitten by their enemies. So if you lose a war, it's God's fault. He smote you. That's what they're saying. To push as horned cattle, as man against man, to strike against with the foot, to kick someone, in other words, to stumble, because you kicked a rock and now you stumble. So if you strike, sure, if that's an ox, it's a ox or a bull, it's a big, strong male bull, whether it's a cow or an ox makes no difference. Ish, that's the word for man, the opposite of a woman, male, not female. Doesn't matter what he identifies with, it's what he was born with. And it says, et shore, shore being the ox or the bull, re'ehu. Now remember, re'ehu is your intimate friend. That's your companion. That's somebody that you know better than they know their self, right? This is somebody who, if you're Jewish, they're Jewish, right? Because you grow up in the same environment. You grow up with the same laws. You grow up basically in the same place with the same experience. It's your intimate friend. Vamet, and die, this is the word for death, umachru. So it says, and sell he. So, and he sell et hashor, and he sell the ox, ha hai. That's alive, living. It's flourishing and being prosperous. It's to breathe, you know, it's of life. The hatzur, and they divide. So they divide. It's, you get this half, I get that half. Et kaspo, you divide up the silver, because there's a sale here, so you're going to divide up the silver. Vegam, and also et hamet, and the dead, yehetzun, and they'll divide up the dead animals. So they're going to divide up the money, they're going to divide up the dead animals. So what's it say? Remember, this is Shemot or Exodus 21:35. And if a man's ox strike the ox of his intimate friend, so the ox is striking another ox, or a bull is striking another bull of an intimate friend. It's, you're a Jew, he's a Jew. That's really all they mean by that. It doesn't mean that you're really, really close friends. It just means that that's really what you're supposed to be if you're both Jews. such that he dies. So one bull strikes another bull and it dies. They will sell the live ox, split the money, and split the body of the dead ox. Of selling the live ox, Rashi said that this verse deals with oxen of equal value, but the text doesn't support his claim. It doesn't really matter if one ox is grown and one ox is not. They will at some point be the same value. It doesn't matter if one was old and one was young. At some point, they are the same value. In any case, the value of the live animal is split and the remains of the dead animal are split. This is in and of itself a way of equalizing, because you're taking whatever the animal would be worth at its prime, and that's the price you're splitting. That's the price you're charging, the price you're splitting. All right, so moving on to 36. Literally it says, or will know, because ox gore he yesterday 3 and not he keep they, Lord his peace he peace, ox after the ox, and the dead he be to he. So it begins with O, which means or. Noda, noda. It's from yada, it's to see, and hence to perceive. Is that right? That would, yeah. To acquire knowledge, to know, to be acquainted. It includes the action of knowing both as commencing and as in completion. You're learning or you already know it. The signification both of seeing and knowing. One, it's to know, to perceive, to be aware, whether by the eyes or by the touch and often of the mind, hence to understand. Or two, to get to know, to discover, whether by seeing or hearing, to know by experience. Or three, to know, to become acquainted with, often put with a euphemism for a man with a woman. Four, it's to know, to be acquainted with anyone, to know by name, to know face to face. And then it's 5, it's to know, to have knowledge of anything. They all sound like the same thing, don't they? 6, to foresee, to expect anything. 7, to turn the mind to something, which is to care for it, to go see about it, to look after it. And 8, to be all-knowing, if you will, to be wise. Those are all the uses of that word. Then it says ki, which means for, because. Shor, that's the word for ox. Nagach, that's the word for gore. Who means he or it. It's, if you say, I was told early on when I was learning Hebrew that there is no Hebrew word for it. Yes, there is. Who is the Hebrew word for it. It literally means he, because in Hebrew you have a gender specific language. So when they say it and it's masculine, they use the word who, which means he. When they say it and it's feminine, they say the Hebrew word he, which is spelled H-I, not H-E, but it's pronounced he. And it just means it in the feminine, right? So they do have a Hebrew word for it. It's just that there's one for the masculine and there's one for the feminine. Anyway, your next word is mi timo, that means yesterday. Shil shom, that means 3. So yesterday 3. You got to know that's an idiom. Because yesterday 3 doesn't make any sense, right? Velo, and not yishme renu. He didn't keep it. It was to keep, to guard, to watch. In a narrow sense, it's as a garden, a man tending to a garden. You know, someone who's plucking away the weeds, so that the goodness, they can flourish. And it's watering and putting some compost in there to feed and that kind of thing. He's tending to the garden. He's trimming the hedges. He's doing whatever gardeners do. In a wider sense, it's to keep safe. It's to preserve. It's often used of God guarding men, keeping them alive. So you get the idea, I think. Bet alive. So it's with his Lord. Shalem, there's the restitution word, that he'll make peace. So he'll make restitution. Yes, shalom, shalem. So peace, he, peace. Again, another idiom. Shore, there's a T in there for some reason. It says short, it should say shore. That's an ox. Tahat, after Hashor, after ox, Behamet, and the dead. Ye, yeah, will be, it will come to pass, lo, to it, or to him. So here's the translation. Or, if it is known that the ox tends to gore, if it is known that the ox yesterday three gore, the ox yesterday three gore. If it is known that the ox has a tendency to gore, that's the yesterday three. It's something that he does over and over and over again. He has a tendency to do it. And in this case, it's gore. So if he knows that the ox tends to gore and the Lord has not watched it, he will absolutely make peace by paying all losses incurred. That's ox for ox, all losses incurred. And the dead animal will be his. If you don't have a verse 37, you're busted. You are obviously using a Christian Bible. The Hebrew Bible and the so-called Christian Old Testament are not always broken up the same. So if you're using a Christian Bible, let me warn you that chapter 22 is going to be very confusing for you. You might want to go out and purchase a Jewish Study Bible, which is also called the JPS, printed by Oxford Press, or pretty much any English translation of the Tanakh that's spelled T-A-N-A-C-H, usually. So let's finish up the last verse of the Jewish chapter 21. It's 21:37. Literally, it's, if he steal man, ox, or sheep, and slaughter he, or sell he 5 oxen, he make peace for the ox, and 4 sheep for the sheep. So it starts off ki, which means if. Ye gano. So we've already had the word, right? It's to steal, to take away something. Even lying is called stealing because you stole the truth, right? But it's to steal as in taking something that didn't belong to you. Ish. So if a man steals, sure, if he steals an ox. And remember, this word sure, it's used of ox and it's used of cows. So it's just a big bull. So if he steals this big bull, or se. Se is used of sheep, yes, but zone is the real word for sheep. So what they're saying here, from the flock. Why would they say from the flock instead of sheep? Well, because in Hebrew, in the ancient Eastern world, a sheep and a goat was exactly the same thing. Now, they're obviously not the same thing, but they're so close to being the same animal that they were called. They do have different words for them, but for the most part, they said the word set, spelled S-E-H, because it was of the flock. The sheep and the goats were always kept together. And it says, utevaho, and slaughter he. So he's stolen it and he's slaughtered it. He's cut it up and cooking it. Or, the word or meharo, or he sells it, hamisha. So if he's cooked it and had it to eat, or he sold it, then it says hamisha, that's 5, vakar, 5 oxen or bulls or cows, ya shalem. So this is the price. This is the restitution. If he stole 1 cow or ox, he now has to pay back 5. Tahat, for Hashor. He has to pay back 5 animals for the one ox. The arba, and 4, the number 4, zone. There's your word for sheep. And 4 sheep, tahat, which means 4, haseh, for the flock. So if you take 1 ox or bull, you have to pay back 5 for that. If you take 1 goat or sheep, you have to pay back 4. Here's the translation. If a man steal an ox or a sheep and slaughter it or sell it, he will pay back. He will make peace. 5 oxen for one ox, and 4 sheep for the one sheep or goat. Kasuto pointed out that the Hammurabi, are you hearing rabbi there? You should be. The Hammurabi Code punished a thief with death if he didn't have the means to pay back what he stole. If you stole something and you couldn't pay it back, you lost your life. That's what the Hammurabi Code said. If you didn't have the way to pay it back, then you lost your life. The Hammurabi Code also said that if a thief broke into someone's home, his punishment was death. Additionally, speaking of Kasuto, he said that if an animal was not in the thief's possession when he was caught, the fine was greater. But the most important thing that he said was, and I quote, if the Torah's purpose were to draw up a code of laws, we should have to assume that the verses here are in disorder. They're out of order. But in light of my explanation, this is Kasuto talking, but in light of my explanation that the legal sections of the Pentateuch, that's the Torah, Penta, five books of the law, are only religious and ethical directions on judicial subjects, it is possible to understand the order of the verses before us. So if we realize what he just said is true, then we can understand what just happened. In short, he said that the Torah is not a code of laws, but rather religious and ethical directions in judicial subjects. So God, what were the Jews calling the 613 laws, right? There's more than that, but they've categorized it in such a way that there's 613. And they think of them as laws. You got to do this, you can't do that, you must do that, you maybe you shouldn't do this, and all that. And there's some of that is very much, if this happens, that will be the punishment. You have some of that. But for the most part, what he is saying is these are examples that are given so that the judges will know how to render a verdict or a judgment in these different cases. They're given as examples, not as a list 1 through 613 of the do's and the don'ts. It's not what it was intended to be. Rashi said that the 5-fold and 4-fold laws applied only to these 2 animals. He believed the penalty for an ox was greater because it took away a man's ability to work. Maybe he's right, maybe he's not. It is a good argument, though. And here we are. This concludes our journey through chapter 21. We will begin chapter 22 next Shabbat, God willing, and the creek don't rise. Shalom, shalom, y'all.